The unexpected visitor. Jack Hawkins wiped the sweat from his brow, leaving a smear of grease across his forehead. The relentless sun of Outpost Zeta-9 beat down on the corrugated metal roof of his workshop, turning it into an oven. But Jack barely noticed the heat. His attention was wholly focused on the delicate circuitry spread out before him on his workbench. At 35, Jack was considered one of the most brilliant engineers in the outer colonies. He was also one of the most reclusive. After a stint in the Earth Defense Force that had left him with more mental scars than physical ones, Jack had retreated to this remote outpost on the fringes of human-controlled space. Here, he could tinker with his inventions in peace, far from the politics and conflicts that plagued the inner systems. The device he was working on now was his most ambitious yet, a quantum communicator that could potentially bridge the vast distances between star systems instantaneously. If it worked, it would revolutionize interstellar communication. If it didn't, well, it would join the growing pile of failed experiments in the corner of his shop. Jack was so engrossed in his work that he almost missed the alarm. A shrill beeping cut through the usual hum of machinery, causing him to jerk upright. His eyes darted to the ancient radar system he'd cobbled together from spare parts. The screen was lit up with an incoming signal, far larger than the occasional supply ship or patrol vessel. "What the hell?" Jack muttered, pushing away from his workbench. He grabbed a pair of binoculars and stepped outside, scanning the sky. At first, he saw nothing but the familiar red-tinged atmosphere of Zeta-9. Then, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Something was entering the atmosphere, trailing fire as it descended. But it wasn't the controlled burn of a ship making planetfall. This object was tumbling, out of control. Jack's heart raced. A ship in distress. Out here. He'd chosen this outpost specifically because it was off any major trade routes. Whatever was coming down, it wasn't supposed to be here. The object grew larger as it fell, and Jack could make out more details. It was sleek, with curves and angles that no human ship possessed. His breath caught in his throat. This was no Earth vessel. This was something entirely alien. The ship, and Jack was certain now that it was a ship, streaked across the sky, disappearing behind a ridge of rusty hills about 10 kilometers from his workshop. A moment later, the ground shook with the impact, and a plume of dust rose into the air. Jack stood frozen, his mind racing. First contact. After centuries of searching the stars, humanity had yet to encounter another sentient species, and now, improbably, one had literally fallen into his lap. He should call it in. There were protocols for this sort of thing, drilled into every colonist and soldier. But the communicator was inside, and Jack found he couldn't tear his eyes away from that dust cloud. Something deep inside him, that spark of curiosity that had driven him to become an engineer in the first place, flared to life. Before he could second-guess himself, Jack was moving. He dashed back into his workshop, grabbing a medkit, some tools, and his personal sidearm. Better safe than sorry. He hesitated for a moment by the long-range communicator, then shook his head. There would be time to alert the authorities later. Right now, there might be lives at stake. Jack's rugged terrain vehicle kicked up a rooster tail of dust as he sped towards the crash site. As he drove, his mind whirled with possibilities. Peaceful contact, hostile invasion, some sort of cosmic accident. He'd soon find out. The alien ship came into view as he crested a hill. Jack's breath caught in his throat. It was beautiful, despite the damage from its rough landing. The hull was a deep iridescent purple that seemed to shift and swirl as he watched. It was roughly cylindrical, perhaps 100 meters long, with sweeping fins that now lay crumpled beneath it. Jack brought his vehicle to a stop a safe distance away and climbed out, approaching cautiously. Up close, he could see that the ship's hull was covered in intricate patterns that might have been writing or circuitry, or both. There was no obvious entrance, no airlock or hatch that he could see. "Hello," he called out, feeling slightly foolish. "Is anyone hurt? Do you need help?" For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, with a sound like singing crystal, a seam appeared in the hull. It widened into an oval portal, and a ramp extruded smoothly to the ground. Jack tensed, his hand moving to the sidearm at his hip. A figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by a soft, pulsing light from within the ship. As it descended the ramp, Jack's eyes widened in awe and disbelief. The alien was roughly humanoid, but their any resemblance to humanity ended. It stood at least 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that shimmered with the same iridescence as the ship's hull. Its head was elongated and smooth, with no visible eyes or mouth. Instead, there were clusters of what looked like sensory organs arranged in symmetrical patterns. As the alien reached the bottom of the ramp, Jack noticed that it was moving with a pronounced limp. One of its lower arms hung at an odd angle, injured in the crash, he guessed. Despite his shock, Jack's training kicked in. He held up his empty hands, trying to project an aura of calm and peace. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said slowly, clearly. "I'm here to help. Do you understand me?" The alien cocked its head to one side, reminding Jack incongruously of a curious dog. Then, to his utter amazement, it spoke. The voice seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, resonating in his bones. "Understanding. Achieved," it said haltingly. "Help. Appreciated. Danger. Imminent." Before Jack could respond, alarms began to blare from within the ship. The alien turned back towards the entrance, its body language conveying clear distress even to human eyes. "What's wrong?" Jack asked, taking a step forward. "What kind of danger?" The alien's response chilled him to the bone. "Core breach. Imminent. Explosion. Will destroy everything." Jack's mind raced. A core breach, presumably in whatever powered this incredible ship, could be catastrophic. If the alien was referring to a matter-antimatter reactor or something even more exotic, the explosion could vaporize everything for kilometers. He made a split-second decision. "I'm an engineer," he said quickly. "Maybe I can help. Show me the problem." The alien regarded him for a long moment, then nodded, a surprisingly human gesture. "Follow," it said simply, and turned back towards the ship. Jack took a deep breath and started up the ramp. As he crossed the threshold into the alien vessel, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping not just into an extraterrestrial craft, but into a new chapter of human history. Whatever happened next would change everything. For him, for humanity, and for their new alien visitors. The interior of the ship was a marvel of organic curves and pulsing light. Surfaces that looked like living metal flowed seamlessly into displays of incomprehensible alien script. Jack forced himself to focus on the task at hand, following the alien through twisting corridors towards what he assumed was the engine room. As they walked, or in the alien's case, limped, Jack tried to gather more information. "I'm Jack," he said, tapping his chest. "Jack Hawkins. Do you have a name I can call you?" The alien made a series of musical tones that Jack's human ears could barely process. "In your phonemes," it said after a moment. "Approximation. Zyra." "Zyra," Jack repeated. "Nice to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Can you tell me more about your ship's core? What kind of energy does it use?" Zyra's response was cut off as they entered a vast chamber that could only be the engine room. In the center, a column of swirling energy pulsed erratically, contained within what looked like a series of rotating rings. Even to Jack's untrained eye, it was clear that the containment was failing. "Quantum singularity," Zyra explained quickly. "Containment field destabilizing. Cannot repair." Jack's mind reeled. A quantum singularity. A black hole used as a power source. It was theoretical in human science, but clearly, the Nebulons had mastered it. If that containment field failed completely, how long do we have? Jack asked, already moving towards what looked like a control panel. 17 of your minutes, Zyra replied. Jack nodded grimly. Then let's get to work. As the countdown to disaster ticked away, human and alien worked side by side in a desperate race against time. Jack's hands flew over alien controls, guided by Zaira's instructions and his own intuition. He might not understand the underlying principles, but engineering had a universal language of its own. With less than a minute to spare, Jack made a final adjustment. The erratic pulsing of the core steadied, then settled into a smooth rhythmic glow. Zaira made a sound that might have been a sigh of relief. Containment stabilized. The alien confirmed. Danger averted. You have saved us all. Jack Hawkins. Jack leaned against the control panel, suddenly exhausted. Happy to help, he said with a weak smile. Though I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a much bigger adventure. As if in response to his words, a new alarm sounded, this one from Jack's own communicator. It seemed the authorities had finally noticed the alien ship's arrival. Jack and Zaira had exchanged a look of perfect understanding. Things were about to get very complicated very quickly. Perhaps, Zaira said, it is time for our peoples to meet properly. Jack nodded, straightening up. I couldn't agree more. Let's go make some history. As they walked back towards the ship's entrance, Jack's mind was already racing with the implications of what had just occurred. First contact, averted disaster, and the dawn of a new era for humanity. All in the span of an hour, and at the center of it all, an unlikely partnership between a reclusive human engineer and an alien visitor from beyond the stars. Whatever came next, Jack knew one thing for certain. Life on Outpost Zeta 9 would never be the same again. Against all odds. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. No sooner had Jack and Zaira emerged from the ship than they were surrounded by a contingent of Earth Defense Force troops, their weapons drawn and faces tense. Jack had to admire their response time, even as he raised his hands in a placating gesture. Stand down, he shouted. They're not hostile. I repeat, the alien visitors are not hostile. A tense standoff ensued, with Jack acting as an impromptu diplomat between the nervous human soldiers and the equally wary Nebulon crew that had followed Zaira out of the ship. It took all of Jack's persuasive skills, rusty as they were after years of isolation, to convince the EDF commander not to open fire or call for reinforcements. Finally, after what felt like hours of negotiations, a tenuous peace was established. The EDF agreed to stand down, and the Nebulons agreed to remain near their ship while Earth authorities were contacted. Jack found himself thrust into the role of mediator, the only human who had any rapport with the aliens. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rusty landscape of Zeta 9, Jack sat with Zaira at the base of the ship's ramp. The alien engineer was using some sort of device to treat the injury to its arm, while Jack nursed a cup of strong coffee provided by one of the EDF soldiers. I must express gratitude, Zaira said, its melodious voice still sending shivers down Jack's spine. Your quick thinking saved not only my crew but potentially your entire outpost. Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what any engineer would do. Your technology. It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Zaira made a sound that might have been a chuckle, and yet you understood enough to avert disaster. Perhaps our species are not so different after all. As they talked, Jack learned more about the Nebulons and their mission. They were explorers, much like humanity, seeking out new life and new civilizations. Their ship, the Stellar Whisper, had suffered a malfunction while studying an anomaly in a nearby star system. The emergency landing on Zeta 9 had been a last-ditch effort to save the crew. We had no idea your species had expanded this far into the galaxy, Zaira admitted. Our long-range scans showed no signs of advanced civilization in this sector. Jack grinned. We're pretty good at staying under the radar when we want to. This outpost is, well, it's not exactly on any official star charts. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek shuttle. Jack recognized the insignia. This was no mere military transport, but a diplomatic vessel. It seemed Earth's leaders were taking this first contact very seriously indeed. The next few days were a blur of meetings, debriefings, and tense negotiations. Jack found himself constantly shuttling between the human diplomats and the Nebulon crew, translating not just words but intentions and cultural nuances. It was exhausting work, but exhilarating too. For the first time in years, Jack felt truly alive, his mind engaged in a challenge worthy of his skills. But as the diplomatic talks dragged on, a new problem emerged. The Stellar Whisper, while no longer in danger of imminent core breach, was far from fully operational. The Nebulon's advanced technology, while incredible, was also incredibly complex. Their own engineers were struggling to effect repairs, hampered by a lack of proper tools and replacement parts. It was Zira who first suggested the unthinkable. "Jack Hawkins," the alien said one evening, as they stood gazing up at the unfamiliar constellations of Zeta 9's night sky, "would you consider assisting us in repairing our vessel?" Jack blinked in surprise. "Me? But your technology is light years beyond anything I've ever worked with. I wouldn't even know where to start." Zira's sensory clusters pulsed with what Jack had come to recognize as amusement. "And yet you managed to stabilize our core with nothing but intuition and a few hasty explanations. Imagine what you could accomplish with proper instruction." The idea was tantalizing, but Jack hesitated. The diplomats, they might not approve. There are probably protocols about sharing technology. "Then we shall not share technology," Zira said simply. "We shall merely work together, as we did in that first crucial moment. What your people do not know, they cannot object to." Jack knew he should refuse. It was probably illegal, definitely against regulations, and possibly dangerous. But the engineer in him, the part that had driven him to the stars in the first place, was already salivating at the prospect of getting his hands on that alien tech. "All right," he said finally. "I'm in. But we'll have to be careful, if we're caught." Zira made a gesture that Jack had learned was the Nebulon equivalent of a dismissive wave. "Leave the subterfuge to me. You focus on the engineering." And so began one of the strangest and most exciting periods of Jack's life. By day, he continued his role as unofficial liaison between humans and Nebulons, sitting through interminable meetings and helping to smooth over cultural misunderstandings. But by night, he slipped aboard the Stellar Whisper, working side by side with Zira and the other Nebulon engineers to slowly bring the ship back to life. It was frustrating, exhilarating work. The Nebulon systems were so advanced that half the time, Jack felt like a caveman trying to repair a quantum computer. But slowly, surely, he began to grasp the underlying principles. The Nebulons used a form of quantum entanglement in their circuitry that allowed for instantaneous communication between ship systems. Their power distribution was handled by a network of microscopic wormholes. The hull itself was a kind of programmable matter, able to reconfigure itself to some degree. As the repairs progressed, Jack found himself growing closer to the Nebulon crew, especially Zira. Despite their alien appearance, he discovered a kindred spirit in the Nebulon engineer, a questing intellect, a dry sense of humor, and a passion for pushing the boundaries of the possible. But as Jack's understanding of Nebulon technology grew, so did his unease. He was breaking about a dozen Earth regulations just by being on the ship unsupervised. If anyone found out what he was really doing, well, he doubted he'd see the outside of a prison cell for a very long time. The crisis came to a head about 2 weeks into the repair effort. Jack was deep in the bowels of the Stellar Whisper, elbow deep in a tangle of what passed for wiring among the Nebulons, when his communicator chirped. It was the human diplomatic team, requesting his immediate presence for an emergency meeting. Jack extricated himself from the ship's innards, exchanged a worried look with Zira, and made his way to the human encampment as quickly as he could without arousing suspicion. He arrived to find the diplomatic team in an uproar. "Hawkins," barked Colonel Reeves, the military liaison, "where the hell have you been? We've got a situation brewing." Jack's heart raced. Had they been discovered? But the colonel's next words sent a different kind of chill down his spine. We've just received word from Earth Command. They're sending a battle group to secure the alien vessel. Apparently, some bigwigs back home are nervous about having unknown alien tech so close to human space. Jack's mind reeled. A battle group. That was madness. The Nebulons had been nothing but peaceful. This could undo weeks of careful diplomacy in an instant. We can't let that happen, Jack said, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. The Nebulons are not a threat. If we treat them like one, we could be starting an interstellar war. The human diplomats argued back and forth, but Jack could see the fear in their eyes. Fear of the unknown. Fear of being responsible for a disaster if the aliens turned out to be hostile after all. It was a fear Jack had known well, once upon a time. But his weeks of working with Zyra and the others had shown him a different truth. As the arguments raged around him, Jack made a decision. It was reckless, probably treasonous, and definitely the biggest risk he'd ever taken in his life. But he knew it was the right thing to do. Slipping away from the meeting, he made his way back to the Stellar Whisper at a run. He found Zyra waiting at the base of the ramp, the alien's posture radiating concern. "We've got a problem," Jack said, gasping for breath. "A big one. How close are we to getting your ship spaceworthy?" Zyra's sensory clusters pulsed rapidly, the Nebulon equivalent of a frown. "We are close, but there are still several critical systems that require attention." "Why? What has happened?" As quickly as he could, Jack explained the situation. Zyra listened in silence, but Jack could sense the alien's growing alarm. "This is most concerning," Zyra said when Jack had finished. "If your military arrives, it could indeed lead to conflict. We cannot allow that to happen." "Agreed," Jack said, "which is why we need to get your ship in the air. Tonight." Zyra was silent for a long moment, its sensory clusters pulsing in rapid patterns that Jack couldn't interpret. Finally, the alien spoke. "What you are suggesting, Jack Hawkins, is incredibly dangerous. If we attempt launch without full systems functionality, there is a high probability of catastrophic failure." Jack nodded grimly. "I know, but if we stay here, there's an even higher probability of catastrophic conflict. Sometimes you have to take a risk to avoid a bigger disaster." Zyra made a sound that might have been a sigh. "You continue to surprise me, Jack Hawkins. Very well. We shall attempt what you suggest. But know this, if we succeed, there will be no returning to your old life. You will be viewed as a traitor by your people." The full weight of what he was proposing hit Jack like a physical blow. He was about to throw away everything. His career, his home, possibly even his freedom, for a group of aliens he'd known for less than a month. It was insane. It was reckless. It was also, he realized, the most right he'd felt about anything in years. "I know," he said softly, "but sometimes you have to leave the past behind to move forward. Besides," he added with a grin, "I've always wanted to see the stars up close." Zyra made the trilling sound that Jack had come to recognize as laughter. "Then let us hope, my friend, that we do not see them too close this night. Come, we have much work to do and little time in which to do it." As they hurried into the ship to begin their desperate repair efforts, Jack felt a curious mix of terror and exhilaration. In a few short hours, he would either be dead in a fiery explosion, imprisoned for treason, or embarking on the greatest adventure of his life. Somehow, he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. Whatever happened next, he was finally living up to the promise he'd made to himself when he first looked up at the stars as a child. To go boldly into the unknown, no matter the cost. The race against time had begun. The human touch. The interior of the Stellar Whisper was a hive of frantic activity. Jack and Zyra moved through the ship's corridors with purpose, barking orders to the rest of the Nebulon crew. Time was their enemy now, each passing second bringing them closer to the arrival of the Earth Defense Force battle group. "Main propulsion is still offline," Zyra reported, its melodious voice tinged with frustration. The quantum flux regulator isn't responding to our recalibration attempts. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, leaving another streak of alien grease across his forehead. "Show me," he said, following Zira to a console that pulsed with swirling, incomprehensible alien script. As Zira manipulated the controls, Jack watched intently. Over the past weeks, he'd begun to grasp the basics of Nebulon technology, but much of it still seemed like magic to his human eyes. Yet as he observed the flow of energy through the ship's systems, displayed in mesmerizing 3D holographics, something clicked in his mind. "Wait," he said, reaching out to point at a particular junction in the power flow. "What's that?" Zira's sensory clusters pulsed in confusion. "That is a standard power shunt. It regulates the flow of quantum energy to the propulsion systems." Jack shook his head, excitement building. "No, look closer. The energy isn't flowing smoothly. It's stuttering, like there's resistance where there shouldn't be." He turned to Zira, his eyes shining with the thrill of discovery. "Your quantum technology, it's based on the principle of superposition, right? Multiple states existing simultaneously." Zira made an affirmative gesture. "Correct. It is the foundation of our full drive and many of our advanced systems." "But what if," Jack said, his words tumbling out in a rush, "what if the quantum states are getting tangled? Like quantum entanglement, but on a macro scale. The energy can't flow properly because it's trying to be in too many states at once." Zira was silent for a long moment, its sensory clusters pulsing rapidly as it processed Jack's words. Then, to Jack's surprise, the alien let out a trill that he recognized as laughter. "Jack Hawkins," Zira said, a note of wonder in its voice, "I believe you may have just solved a problem that has plagued our engineers for generations. We've always assumed the energy flow was optimal, but if what you're suggesting is correct..." Jack grinned, the adrenaline of scientific breakthrough coursing through him. "Then we might be able to streamline your entire power distribution system. But first, we need to untangle those quantum states." What followed was a frenzy of activity unlike anything Jack had ever experienced. Human intuition and alien technology melded in a dance of innovation. Jack's understanding of classical physics provided a fresh perspective on the Nebulon's quantum systems, allowing him to see patterns and possibilities that the aliens had overlooked. Together, Jack and Zira rewrote subroutines, recalibrated energy flows, and essentially reinvented a significant portion of the Stellar Whisper's operating system. The other Nebulon engineers watched in amazement as systems that had been sluggish or unresponsive for years suddenly sprang to life with newfound efficiency. As they worked, Jack found himself marveling at the ease of his collaboration with Zira. Despite their vastly different backgrounds and physiologies, they seemed to operate on the same wavelength, anticipating each other's needs and building on each other's ideas seamlessly. "You know," Jack said during a brief pause to let a particularly complex calculation run, "back on Earth, they used to say that the best engineering teams were like well-oiled machines. But this is something else entirely." Zira made a gesture that Jack had come to recognize as agreement. "Indeed. Among my people, we have a saying. The strongest alloy is forged from diverse elements. I believe you and I are proving the truth of that adage." Jack felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. He'd come to space seeking solitude, convinced that he worked best alone. Now he was beginning to realize how wrong he'd been. Their moment of reflection was interrupted by an alarm from the ship's communication system. One of the other Nebulon crew members called out in their musical language, and Zira's posture suddenly stiffened. "What is it?" Jack asked, tension creeping back into his voice. "The human battle group," Zira replied grimly. "They've entered the system. We have less than an hour before they reach orbit." Jack felt his heart rate spike. "Then we'd better make this count. How are we looking on propulsion?" Zira turned back to the console, manipulating the controls with its 4 arms moving in perfect coordination. "Power flow is at 92% efficiency, a marked improvement, But not enough for a safe launch, Jack finished. He ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. Okay, think. We've solved the power distribution issue, but there's still something we're missing. He closed his eyes, mentally reviewing everything he'd learned about Nebulon technology over the past weeks. The quantum core, the programmable hull, the microscopic wormhole network that handled internal communications. His eyes snapped open. The hull, he exclaimed. Zyra, your ship's hull. It can reconfigure itself to some degree, right? Zyra's sensory clusters pulsed in affirmation. Yes, though the process is energy-intensive and typically only used for repairs or adapting to different atmospheric conditions. But what if we used it for more than that? Jack said, excitement building in his voice. What if we reconfigured the entire outer hull to act as one massive energy conduit? We could channel power from the quantum core directly through the ship's skin, bypassing half the internal distribution network. Zyra was silent for a long moment, its sensory clusters pulsing rapidly as it processed the idea. Then, slowly, it began to emit the trilling sound that Jack now recognized as Nebulon laughter. Jack Hawkins, Zyra said, its voice filled with a mix of amusement and awe. I believe you may have just invented an entirely new class of starship design. The energy requirements would be enormous, but with the improvements we've already made to the power distribution, we might just pull this off, Jack finished, grinning from ear to ear. What followed was a blur of activity. Jack and Zyra worked in perfect synchronization, rewriting the ship's operating system on the fly to accommodate the radical new power distribution method. The other Nebulon engineers scrambled to make the necessary physical adjustments, reconfiguring power couplings and rerouting energy conduits. As they worked, Jack kept one eye on the countdown timer. The Earth Defense Force ships were drawing ever closer, and he knew that once they arrived, their window of opportunity would slam shut. Finally, with less than 10 minutes to spare, Zyra looked up from the main control console. I believe we are ready, the alien said, its voice tinged with both excitement and trepidation. But Jack, you must understand. What we are attempting has never been done before. The stresses on the ship will be enormous. If our calculations are off by even a fraction, Jack nodded grimly. We'll be torn apart. I know. But if we stay here, we're looking at an interstellar incident at best, all-out war at worst. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. He placed a hand on what passed for Zyra's shoulder, marveling at how natural the gesture felt despite their alien physiology. I trust you, Zyra, and I trust what we've built together. Let's show the universe what happens when human ingenuity meets Nebulon technology. Zyra made a gesture that Jack had come to recognize as the alien equivalent of a smile. Very well, my friend. Let us make history, or become a very interesting footnote in it. As the Nebulon crew strapped themselves into their stations, Jack took a position next to Zyra at the main control console. Through the ship's view screen, he could see the first pinpricks of light that signaled the approaching Earth Defense Force ships. Last chance to back out, he said, only half joking. Zyra's response was to extend one of its arms, offering a control interface that pulsed with soft light. I believe the human phrase is, ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. Jack laughed, some of the tension leaving his body. He placed his hand on the interface, feeling the alien technology hum beneath his palm. Close enough. Let's light this candle. With a thought from Jack and a command from Zyra, the stellar whisper came to life. The hull began to glow with a soft, pulsing light as energy from the quantum core flowed through it. The ship vibrated with barely contained power, like a racehorse training at the gate. Hull integrity holding, one of the Nebulon engineers called out. Power flow stable at 97% efficiency. Jack felt a surge of elation. It was working. But they weren't out of the woods yet. Zyra, start the launch sequence. Let's see if this crazy idea of ours can actually fly. Zyra's fingers danced over the controls, and Jack felt the ship begin to rise. Through the view screen, He watched as the rusty landscape of Zeta-9 fell away beneath them. Warning klaxons blared from the human encampment, but it was too late. The stellar whisper rose higher, picking up speed as it climbed. Jack felt the vibrations intensify as they hit the upper atmosphere, the hull glowing brighter as it channeled more power to fight against the planet's gravity. "We're approaching escape velocity," Zyra reported, its voice tense with concentration. Hull temperature rising, but within acceptable parameters. Jack gritted his teeth, his hand still pressed firmly against the control interface. He could feel the ship straining against the laws of physics, pushing the boundaries of what should be possible. For a moment, he feared they had overreached, that their audacious plan would end in fiery failure. Then, with a final surge of power that made the entire ship shudder, they broke free of Zeta-9's atmosphere. The vibrations smoothed out, the glow of the hull dimming to a soft, steady pulse. Through the view screen, Jack saw the blackness of space, studded with stars that seemed close enough to touch. A cheer went up from the Nebulon crew. Zyra turned to Jack, its sensory clusters pulsing with what he now recognized as joy. "We did it, Jack Hawkins. Your impossible idea worked." Jack laughed, feeling lightheaded with relief and exhilaration. "I can't believe it, actually. Wait, what's that?" He pointed to a series of bright flashes in the distance. The Earth Defense Force ships had arrived, and they did not look happy about the Stellar Whisper's unauthorized departure. Zyra's posture stiffened. "They are charging weapons. Jack, I fear your people may not be willing to let us leave peacefully." Jack's mind raced. They had come too far, accomplished too much, to fail now. And in that moment, as he stood on the bridge of an alien ship he had helped resurrect, facing down the forces of his own people, Jack Hawkins made a decision that would change the course of human and Nebulon history forever. "Then let's show them what this ship can really do," he said, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "Zyra, plot a course out of the system. It's time to introduce the galaxy to a little human ingenuity." As the Stellar Whisper's engines flared to life, propelling them towards the stars at impossible speeds, Jack felt a sense of profound rightness. He had left Earth seeking solitude and purpose. Instead, he had found friendship, innovation, and a new frontier beyond his wildest dreams. The adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning. Unintended consequences. The Stellar Whisper streaked through space, its hull glowing with the power of Jack and Zyra's revolutionary modifications. Behind them, the Earth Defense Force ships grew smaller, their weapons fire dissipating harmlessly in the wake of the alien vessel's incredible speed. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "I can't believe we actually pulled that off," he said, shaking his head in amazement. Zyra's sensory clusters pulsed with what Jack had come to recognize as amusement. "You humans have a saying, I believe. Where there's a will, there's a way. You have certainly proven the truth of that adage, Jack Hawkins." As the adrenaline of their daring escape began to fade, Jack found himself confronted with the reality of his situation. He was now, effectively, a fugitive from Earth. He had thrown in his lot with an alien species, betraying his own people in the process. The weight of his actions settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. Zyra, ever perceptive, noticed the change in Jack's demeanor. "You are troubled," the alien observed. "Do you regret your decision to aid us?" Jack shook his head. "No, not regret exactly. I know what we did was right. It's just, I burned a lot of bridges. I can never go home again." Zyra made a gesture that Jack had come to understand as sympathy. "Home is not always a place, Jack Hawkins. Sometimes it is the people with whom we choose to surround ourselves. You will always have a place among the Nebulons, should you wish it." Jack felt a warmth in his chest at Zyra's words. He was about to respond when an alarm blared from one of the nearby consoles. Another Nebulon crew member called out in their musical language, their tone urgent. "What's wrong?" Jack asked, tension creeping back into his voice. Zyra moved to the console, its four arms working in perfect synchronization as it analyzed the data. "We are detecting an energy surge in the quantum core," the alien reported, its voice tight with concern. "It appears our modifications have had unintended consequences." Jack felt his heart rate spike. What kind of consequences? "The power flow through the hull is creating a kind of quantum resonance," Zyra explained. "It's amplifying the effects of our full drive. We're moving faster than we should be, faster than we can safely control." Jack's mind raced. "Can we shut it down? Reroute the power?" Zyra's sensory clusters pulsed rapidly, the nebulon equivalent of a frown. "Not without risking a core breach. The energy levels are too high. If we don't find a way to stabilize the resonance, we could tear a hole in the fabric of space-time itself." The implications hit Jack like a physical blow. In their desperation to escape, they had created something potentially far more dangerous than an interspecies conflict. If they lost control of the ship, they could cause devastation on an unimaginable scale. "Okay," Jack said, forcing himself to remain calm. "We created this problem by combining human and nebulon technology. Maybe we can solve it the same way. What if we use the hull's reconfigurable properties to create a kind of quantum dampening field?" Zyra's sensory clusters pulsed with interest. "Intriguing. We could potentially use the hull to absorb and redistribute the excess energy. But the calculations required would be immense. We would need to account for the curvature of spacetime, the fluctuations in the quantum field." "Then let's get to work," Jack said, his earlier melancholy forgotten in the face of a new challenge. "You handle the quantum mechanics. I'll work on the energy distribution algorithms. Between the two of us, we should be able to crack this." What followed was a frenzy of activity that made their earlier repair efforts seem leisurely by comparison. Jack and Zyra worked in perfect synchronization, their minds melding across the barriers of species and culture. Human intuition and creativity combined with nebulon precision and advanced knowledge, creating solutions that neither species could have devised alone. As they worked, the stellar whisper continued to accelerate, pushing the boundaries of what should have been possible. Through the view screen, Jack could see stars streaking by at an impossible rate. The fabric of space itself seemed to be warping around them, reality bending under the strain of their passage. "We're approaching a critical threshold," one of the other nebulon engineers called out. "If we can't stabilize the resonance in the next few minutes." Jack gritted his teeth, fingers flying over the alien controls. "Almost there," he muttered. "Just need to balance the quantum flux with the energy distribution." "Zyra, how are we looking on your end?" "The calculations are complete," Zyra reported. "But Jack, there's something you should know. The energy levels we're dealing with, they're unlike anything we've encountered before. If our theory is correct, we may have inadvertently created a new form of full travel." Jack's eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes," Zyra confirmed. "If we succeed, we will have revolutionized interstellar travel. But if we fail, we'll create the biggest disaster since the Big Bang," Jack finished grimly. "No pressure, right?" With a final burst of effort, Jack and Zyra implemented their solution. The ship's hull began to pulse with a new pattern of energy, absorbing and redistributing the quantum resonance. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing seemed to change. The stellar whisper continued to accelerate, reality warping around it. Then, gradually, the vibrations began to subside. The streaking stars in the view screen slowed, resolving into recognizable points of light. A collective sigh of relief went up from the Nebulon crew. "It's working," Zyra announced, its voice filled with wonder. "The resonance is stabilizing. We've done it, Jack." Jack let out a whoop of triumph, caught up in the moment of victory. But as the immediate danger passed, a new realization dawned on him. He turned to Zyra, his expression a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Zyra," he said slowly, "exactly how far have we traveled?" The alien was silent for a long moment, its sensory clusters pulsing as it consulted the ship's navigational systems. When it finally spoke, its voice was filled with awe. Jack Hawkins, Zyra said, if these readings are correct, we have just crossed half the galaxy in a matter of minutes. The implications of Zyra's words hit Jack like a physical blow. They hadn't just escaped the Earth Defense Force or solved a potentially catastrophic problem. They had changed the fundamental rules of space travel. We need to understand exactly what we've done here, Jack said, his mind already racing with possibilities. This could change everything. For humans, for nebulons, for the entire galaxy. Zyra made a gesture of agreement. Indeed. But Jack, we must also consider the consequences. This technology, in the wrong hands, could be devastating. We have a responsibility to ensure it is used wisely. Jack nodded grimly. He knew Zyra was right. They had stumbled upon something incredible, but also incredibly dangerous. The power to cross vast distances in the blink of an eye could be used for exploration and peace, or for conquest and war. As the stellar whisper drifted in unknown space, billions of light years from where their journey had begun, Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had left Earth as a reclusive engineer, seeking solitude among the stars. Now he found himself at the center of a discovery that could reshape the galaxy. So, he said, turning to Zyra with a wry smile, I guess the question is, what do we do now? Zyra's sensory clusters pulsed in a pattern that Jack had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. We have crossed a threshold, Jack Hawkins. There is no going back. But perhaps we can go forward together, human and Nebulon, charting a new course for both our peoples. Jack nodded, feeling a sense of purpose that he hadn't experienced in years. Together, he agreed. But first, we need to figure out exactly where we are and what this new drive of ours is capable of. As they set about analyzing their position and the full capabilities of their accidental invention, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. They had made a leap into the unknown, and the possibilities stretched out before them like the endless stars. But even as he threw himself into the work, a part of Jack's mind was already looking ahead. They had escaped immediate danger, but he knew the repercussions of their actions would eventually catch up with them. Earth would not simply forget about the rogue human who had aided an alien escape, and who knew what other forces in the galaxy might take an interest in their revolutionary technology. The adventure, it seemed, was far from over. In fact, Jack realized with a mix of trepidation and exhilaration, it might only just be beginning. A new frontier. The days that followed their accidental leap across the galaxy were a whirlwind of discovery and innovation. Jack and Zyra worked tirelessly to understand and refine their revolutionary drive, which they had dubbed the quantum resonance engine. The more they learned, the more staggering the implications became. It's not just faster than light travel, Jack explained to the assembled Nebulon crew, his eyes shining with excitement. It's instantaneous travel to any point in the universe. Distance becomes meaningless. Zyra's sensory clusters pulsed with agreement. The applications are limitless. Exploration, trade, cultural exchange on a scale never before imagined. But also the potential for conflict on an unprecedented scale, Jack finished grimly. The weight of their discovery pressed down on him. They held in their hands the power to unite the galaxy, or to tear it apart. As they deliberated on their next move, fate intervened. The Stellar Whisper's long-range sensors picked up an approaching vessel, an Earth ship, somehow having tracked them across the vast distance. How is this possible? One of the Nebulon engineers asked, their musical voice tinged with alarm. Jack's mind raced, then hit upon the answer. The quantum entanglement, he said. When we made our jump, we must have left a trace, a kind of quantum wake. They followed it here. Zyra made a gesture of concern. If they have managed this, others may as well. We are no longer safe here. Jack nodded, his expression determined. Then we need to make a choice. Do we run, keep this technology to ourselves, or do we face this head-on? There was a moment of silence on the bridge as the implications of Jack's words sank in. Then, to his surprise, one of the other Nebulon crew members spoke up. "In our history," the alien said, "there is a story of a great discovery that changed the course of our civilization. Our ancestors chose to share it freely, believing that knowledge should benefit all. It led to an age of unprecedented growth and cooperation." Jack felt a surge of admiration for the Nebulans. Despite the risk, they were considering the greater good. It solidified his resolve. "Zira," he said, turning to his friend and partner in this incredible journey, "I think it's time we stopped running and started talking. What do you say we invite our Earth friends aboard for a chat?" Zira's sensory clusters pulsed with what Jack now recognized as a mix of amusement and approval. "A bold move, Jack Hawkins. But then, boldness seems to be a human specialty. Let us hope it serves us well once more." The next few hours were tense as they prepared for the encounter. Jack felt the weight of history on his shoulders. He was about to become humanity's de facto ambassador to not just the Nebulans, but potentially the entire galaxy. When the Earth ship finally docked with the stellar Whisper, Jack was surprised to see a familiar face leading the delegation. Colonel Reeves, the military liaison from Zeta-9, stepped aboard, his expression a mix of awe and suspicion. "Hawkins," Reeves said, his voice gruff, "you've led us on quite a chase. Do you have any idea of the chaos you've caused?" Jack straightened his shoulders, meeting the colonel's gaze steadily. "I have a pretty good idea, sir, but I also have a proposal that might just change everything." What followed was one of the most surreal diplomatic meetings in the history of either species. In the Stellar Whispers conference room, suspended in the void between galaxies, representatives of humanity and the Nebulans sat down to discuss the future. Jack and Zira presented their findings, explaining the potential of the quantum resonance engine. They spoke of the dangers, yes, but also of the incredible opportunities for exploration, scientific advancement, and interspecies cooperation. "What you're proposing," Colonel Reeves said slowly, "is nothing short of a revolution in how we view the universe." "Exactly," Jack agreed, "which is why we can't keep this to ourselves. This isn't just about Earth or the Nebulans. This is about the future of all sentient life in the galaxy." The discussions went on for days. There were moments of tension, of fear, and mistrust. But there were also moments of wonder, of shared vision, and hope for the future. In the end, a historic agreement was reached. The technology would be shared, but under strict controls. A joint Earth-Nebulon Commission would be established to oversee its development and application. And at the heart of it all would be a new organization, the Galactic Exploration and Peacekeeping Force. "We're going to need people who understand both human and Nebulon perspectives," Colonel Reeves said, looking meaningfully at Jack. "People who can bridge the gap between our species. Interested in a job, Hawkins?" Jack felt a surge of emotion, pride, excitement, and a touch of trepidation. He looked at Zira, saw the encouragement in his friend's posture. "I can't think of anything I'd rather do," he said. The months that followed were a blur of activity. As news of the revolutionary technology spread, other alien species came forward, drawn by the promise of instantaneous travel across the cosmos. The galaxy was opening up in ways no one had ever imagined possible. Jack found himself at the center of it all, working alongside Zira to help build understanding between the various species. There were challenges, of course. Age-old conflicts and prejudices didn't disappear overnight. But for every setback, there were moments of triumph. First contacts, shared discoveries, the birth of a truly galactic community. One evening, as Jack stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned exploration vessel Horizon, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. The viewport showed a vista of stars unlike anything he'd ever seen. They were preparing for their first jump to another galaxy. Zira joined him, the alien's presence a comforting familiarity in the face of the unknown. "Having second thoughts, Jack Hawkins?" Zira asked, a note of teasing in its melodious voice. Jack chuckled. "Not a chance. Though I have to admit, when I left Earth looking for solitude, I didn't exactly picture this. The universe, Zyra said sagely, has a way of taking us to places we never expected. Often, they are precisely where we need to be. Jack nodded, feeling a profound sense of rightness. He had left Earth as a recluse, running from his past. Now, he stood at the forefront of the greatest adventure in the history of sentient life, with friends of multiple species at his side. "You know," he said, grinning at Zyra, "I think it's about time we saw what's out there. Care to do the honors?" Zyra made the trilling sound that Jack now knew was laughter. Together, they moved to the control console. With a shared glance of excitement, they activated the quantum resonance engine. The stars outside the viewport blurred, then resolved into an entirely new pattern. A galaxy never before seen by human or Nebulan eyes spread out before them, teeming with possibility. As the crew erupted in cheers around them, Jack felt a sense of profound peace. He had found his purpose, his place in the universe, and it was bigger and more wonderful than he could have ever imagined. "Well," he said, clapping Zyra on what passed for its shoulder, "shall we go see what's out there?" Zyra's sensory clusters pulsed with shared excitement. "Indeed, my friend. The greatest adventure is just beginning." As the horizon moved forward into uncharted space, Jack Hawkins, once a reclusive engineer, now a bridge between species and an explorer of the cosmos, felt the thrill of the unknown course through him. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and humanity, hand in hand with their new alien allies, was ready to embrace it all. The adventure, it seemed, would never truly end. And Jack wouldn't have it any other way.